Okay, thank you very much, Luigi. I will give my talk in English because I prepared my presentation in English. I will give a talk about the issue of wolf-dog hybridization, and I thank you, Luigi, and the scientific committee for having invited me to talk about this issue. I have prepared this talk in collaboration with Paolo Ciucci from the University of La Sapienza, but as you will see in the last slide, there is a large number of contributors. Okay, let's set the scene. What are we talking about? We're talking about hybridization and the effect of this phenomenon on wildlife conservation. Hybridization has been traditionally described as the breeding, crossbreeding between individuals belonging to different species. Then lately has been also considered as hybridization the phenomenon that includes breeding between individuals belonging to different subspecies of the same species, or even different populations of the same species. Hybridization is also considered between wild and their domestic relatives. Of course, when we talk about hybridization, we can certainly talk about natural hybridization, but in the case of hybridization between wild species and their domestic relatives, we most often talk about anthropogenic hybridization. There are several famous cases of such kind of hybridizations, and probably one of the most famous one is the one related to the wildcat in Scotland, where the wild population of the wildcat has been gradually lost by hybridization with domestic cats. And in fact, there are virtually no wildcats now in Scotland, and very limited management interventions can be done to restore the wild populations. Other cases are the ruddy duck coming from North America that hybridized with the white-headed duck, and the resulting hybrids have been officially recognized as a threat to the conservation of the native species, and there even the European Commission has launched and authorized an intensive intervention for actually eliminate the hybrids and limit the population of the non-native species in order to preserve the native species. So, when we talk about hybridization between wolf and dog, we certainly talk about something that is not new, that is probably natural, has been a natural process for the evolution of a dog, and that has probably occurred several times in evolutionary history. So why is it a concern? Why are we talking about hybridization when we deal with wolf conservation? Well, because, as Luigi said earlier, wolf is not just a species, it's not just a wild species. Wolf is something particular not only for the ecological role that it plays, but also for the role that it plays in our culture, in our minds, in our the feelings that it the feeling that people have towards these species, and the polarized positions of the society. So when we decide one way or another to manage wolf-dog hybrids, we have to deal with all these issues that are attached to the image of the wolf. And it's particularly difficult to find a solution as for many other management solutions that receives the agreement of different polarized parties. But what we really need to decide about is what we actually want to preserve. Do we want to preserve the species wolf, or do we want to preserve its ecological role, what Kent Redford called the wolfness? Well, this is one basic question that we need to ask ourselves. Now, why are we here talking about wolf-dog hybridization? Is this really relevant at European scale for an international audience? There are no official reports of this phenomenon across Europe, and at least in the literature there are 8 countries that reported to have recorded hybrids in scientific journals. So we decided to run such a survey in order to provide a first preliminary overview of the relevance of this phenomenon. Of course, we not only asked for occurrence, but also for any eventual management options that were in place in the countries that we surveyed. What we present here is the preliminary results of these surveys, and of course, no solutions, but basic inspirational facts that might serve for alimenting the discussion. So what we did is we prepared a set of 3 very broad questions, very simple questions, and in case the answer to one of these questions was positive, then there were additional questions, so there were nested questions. And essentially, there were questions related to occurrence of hybrids, presence of any management action, and how the hybridization phenomenon was considered, if a threat or not for world conservation. Excuse me. We have obtained data from 25 European countries. European is in geographical sense, not European Union sense. And 19 of them reported having recorded hybrids. Now this map shows the baseline distribution that Petra has shown you earlier, and I overlaid it with a red transparent layer to indicate where were the countries, which were the countries that reported hybridization. So where you see this brownish color is the countries where hybridization has been reported. And hybridization was reported to be recorded since the 60s, for example, in Spain, or only very recently, for example, in Romania in 2017. In some countries, maybe it's not reported because it's not been searched for. Now, of course, having reported hybrids doesn't mean that the hybridization is widespread and cause a real and recurrent threat to the wolf population. So here you can see a map showing where hybridization has been reported to be present only in few sporadic cases that have been dealt with, or countries where hybridization has been reported as being a widespread and recurrent phenomenon. As you can see, there are only few countries where hybridization is reported as a widespread and recurrent phenomenon, and where actions is probably badly needed. Now, let's see some technicalities. How were hybrids detected? In the majority of countries that responded to the questionnaires, genetic analysis were undertaken. Only former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia and Albania reported to have recorded hybrids, only based on phenotypical evidence, and you can see there the pictures of the individuals that were reported as being hybrids. Of course, the fact that most countries use DNA analysis is excellent news, but for those of you who are familiar with these issues, this doesn't mean that we can think of being on a safe side. There is a lot of uncertainty in DNA analysis and in terms of approach, analytical approach. Loci, number of loci used, type of markers, whether we use new techniques such as SNPs or more traditional techniques such as nuclear loci or mitochondrial DNA. And these, in addition, also the reference populations of wolves and dogs, these increases the uncertainty, okay, of when we want to define what a hybrid is. In terms of legal framework, there is no explicit legal document that refer to how hybrids should be managed, except for a recommendation from the Berne Convention Committee, recommendation number 173 of 2014, where the LCIE has actually contributed, where there is an explicit reference to hybridization as being recognized as a threat to wolf conservation, and the signatory members, the signatory states are encouraged to take active management intervention, possibly by removing those individuals from the population, minimizing the risk of affecting the wolf population. In 2017, a reply to a Parliament inquiry from the European Union explicitly made reference to this recommendation, and Mr. Kamenu, representing the Commission, said that wolf-dog hybrids are not a species of community interest. They're not listed in any of the annexes of the Habitat Directives, and member states should make reference to the recommendation of the Berne Convention. At national level, those countries on your left, here, actually have written reference to their local documents, either management plan or rules or documents or hunting law, whereby hybridization, well, hybrids should be actually removed, right, from the population. Where the other countries that responded have no specific guidance for that address wolf-dog hybridization, but somehow some interventions have been made, and most of them are removal. In the majority of cases is actually lethal removal. Here are some of the pictures that were kindly provided by the respondents to the questionnaires, and you can see some of the strange-looking phenotypes that were associated with hybridization. You can see that colors is probably the character that varies the most. Now, some unresolved questions here. First of all, the definition of hybrids. It's largely rely on technicalities, but also on ecological issues, on what the society considers hybrids, and also the phenotypic characters of those odd-looking animals. And we should, again, go back and take into consideration the value attached to wolf when we want to define hybrids. So once we have defined hybrids, we need to decide what to do and when. This is a classical representation of hybridization that was produced by Allendorf and colleagues in 2001, where the different situations that led to hybridization were put in different conditions for eventual management intervention. So when hybridization produces first generation that are sterile, then the problem is mainly ecological. So we are producing, well, there is the production of animals that might interfere with wolves at the ecological level, that might be competition, for example. When hybrids are fertile, we might find ourselves in two situations where hybrids are not so frequent, but frequent enough to be detected. So there might be scope for intervention. But when we are in the type 6 situation, so what Allendorf called hybrid swarm, then I think a new question should be asked: what we want to preserve. We might also analyze the situation where we are at two scales, temporal and spatial. Here you have an example of some hybrid samples detected in Italy, coming from the publication of the work by Verardi and colleagues in 2006. And they were spread all across the Apennine chain, but they were coming from different ages, okay, different years. So it's not the case that they might be present all at the same time. So this is an important detail that we need to analyze. Are we in the situation where we have few hybrid packs, and once we remove them, they are clustered in one restricted area, and then if we remove them, we have significantly mitigated the impact of hybridization? Or are we in a situation where hybrids are widespread in the target population? I want to briefly describe you two case studies, both of them coming from Italy, and both of them actually addressed by two LIFE projects. As Luigi has shown, this is one of the first hybrids that was detected by himself, actually, in Italy in 1975, but was given little concern, little attention by the hence community or management authorities. Then several cases of hybridization were reported, either formally or informally, in the 3 decades after. But until 2010, the literature never reported at national scale a sampling percentage of hybrids higher than 6%. This comes from the work that I showed you earlier, Verardi and colleagues. In Tuscany, there was a specific case where a pack of hybrids was identified. They were blackish, and they were inside a regional park, and when they were identified in 2000, nothing was done, so they were left reproducing for at least 2 or 3 times. And in 2010, we decided to do something. So we met the positive attitude of the provincial administration, Provincia di Grosseto, and we started in 2011 the LIFE Hybrid-Wolf project. That was a very much pioneering project, okay, where we asked the provincial administration to take the courage to do something that might collect negative response from the local communities. So the project areas was Grosseto province, and the objectives were the removal of hybrids, of all the hybrids that were present inside the regional park, Maremma Regional Park, and in Amiata mountain, that's here. We made an incredible effort of capturing both hybrids and free-ranging dogs, being identified, of course, as the source of hybridization. And we gathered some satisfactory results, I would say very cautiously satisfactory. 13 hybrids removed, captured. 2 of them were actually released because an agreement had to be reached with the genetic lab in Ispra on what had to be considered a hybrid in genetic terms. And 11 are kept in permanent enclosures. But the most significant contribution that the project has given to the Italian management of this phenomenon is the production of guidelines for the management of hybrids, wolf-dog hybrids. We made an attempt to formalize a structured document that could guide any manager in decision making when decided to face the phenomenon of hybridization. In our case, the management option was permanent captivity, which is of course an extremely expensive option, but met the favor of animal rights groups. The second example I want to show you is the ongoing LIFE LUPO project that is being developed in Appennino Tosco-Emiliano National Park and in Gran Sasso National Park, whereby we are aiming at mitigating the impact of free-ranging dogs and again removing the detected hybrids in the 2 national parks. We of course referred to the document produced by Life Hybridwolf, and as a management option we opted for the sterilization and release of hybrids, not before having equipped them with a GPS radio collar in order to detect their movement and understand a little bit better their pattern behavior. In the 2 years of capture efforts, we have managed to remove 16 hybrids. 9 of them are pups, and some of them are being tracked with GPS collars. So we have actually information. One of them has actually moved from Appennino Tosco-Emiliano to the Alps, and then we lost track of it, but has a very distinct phenotypic behavior, phenotypic character, so it can be easily recognized. A couple of remarks about these case studies. I think incredible efforts are made here, and the very intrinsic value of this project is the demonstrative one that they have, that the local administration take the responsibility to accept that hybridization is a problem for the conservation of wolves, and they want to do something. But I think what is needed here, and I look at Eugenio, is a formal position of the national authority. We asked several times for the endorsement of the guidelines. They were actually mentioned and attached as an appendix to the very much debated management plan, Italian management plan for wolf management and conservation. But still, there is no formal position of the national authority. So I think this is now needed. So general conclusions here. We're not just talking of technicalities when we deal with wolf-dog hybridization. It's not something that needs to be dealt by very specialized scientists. It needs to be informed by scientists, but it is something very much related to the society again. There is a general lack, again, within the scientific community, there is a general lack of agreement. Is hybridization really a threat, or is it an opportunity to strengthen the ecological role of a threatened species? Whatever it is, whatever it might be considered, management decisions have to be politics, okay? And they must be tailored, taking into account the local situations, the local population conditions. Is it in expansion? Is it in very low density, very few individuals? Is the population of free-ranging dog controllable or not? So this is, I think, the major challenge. I want to thank you for the attention, but I also want to thank all the contributors that made this presentation possible. Thank you very much.